The Holloway reunion. Marcus Holloway's hands trembled as he turned the yellowed pages of his grandmother's photo album, dust motes dancing in the late afternoon sunlight, streaming through her bedroom window. He'd been tasked with sorting through her belongings after the funeral, but nothing had prepared him for what he found, tucked between family portraits and Christmas morning snapshots. The photograph stopped him cold. 26 years had passed since the Holloway family reunion of 1988, yet the image before him felt like a punch to the gut. There they were, Uncle Jerome, Aunt Patricia, and their 3 children, all frozen in time at what should have been a joyous gathering. But it wasn't their presence in the photo that made Marcus's breath catch. It was what he saw in the background, barely visible behind the picnic tables and laughing relatives. A figure in a dark coat, standing at the edge of the frame, watching. Marcus had been 12 when his uncle's entire family vanished without a trace. One day they were there, sharing potato salad and stories, and the next, their house stood empty, doors unlocked, dinner still on the table. The police had found no signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play. It was as if 5 people had simply ceased to exist. Now, at 38, Marcus stared at the photograph with the seasoned eyes of a detective, a career he'd chosen, he often suspected, because of that terrible summer. The figure in the background wasn't random. The positioning was too deliberate, the stance too purposeful. Someone had been watching his family that day, someone who knew what was coming. His phone buzzed. Sarah, his partner both at work and in life, checking in about dinner plans. He ignored it, unable to tear his gaze from the album. Page after page revealed the same truth. The watcher was there in multiple photos, always in the shadows, always observing. "Dear God," Marcus whispered, recognizing the face that had haunted his nightmares for decades. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. Marcus clutched the album tighter, his police training screaming warnings his younger self had never learned to hear. Through the lace curtains he could see a familiar silhouette on the porch. The same figure from the photograph stood at his grandmother's door. Marcus's service weapon felt heavy against his ribs as he approached the door. 26 years of wondering, of theories whispered at family gatherings, of his mother's tears when she thought no one was looking. All of it crystallized into this single moment. "I know you're there, Marcus," the voice called through the door, gravelly with age but unmistakably familiar. "I've been waiting a long time to have this conversation." Against every instinct, Marcus opened the door. The man before him had aged considerably, his dark hair now silver, his face lined with what looked like profound exhaustion. But the eyes, those calculating, predatory eyes, remained unchanged. "Uncle Robert," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. Robert Holloway smiled, but it held no warmth. "May I come in? I think it's time you learned the truth about what happened to Jerome and his family." The smart play would be to arrest him on the spot, to call for backup, to follow protocol. But Marcus had spent half his life searching for answers, and they were standing on his grandmother's doorstep, asking to be let in. "Hands where I can see them," Marcus said, stepping aside. Robert chuckled as he entered, his movements careful and deliberate. "Still the cautious one, just like your father. He never trusted me either, you know. Smart man." The living room felt smaller with Robert in it, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Marcus positioned himself between his uncle and the door, one hand resting on his weapon. "Where are they?" Marcus asked. "Where's Jerome's family?" Robert settled into the worn armchair that had been Grandma Rose's favorite, his fingers drumming against the faded fabric. "That's not the right question, nephew. The right question is why they had to disappear." "Because you killed them." "No," Robert's voice was firm, almost offended. "I saved them." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus had interrogated enough suspects to recognize the difference between delusion and truth, and something in Robert's tone suggested this wasn't simple madness. "Explain," Marcus said. Robert leaned forward, his eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "Jerome discovered something he shouldn't have. About our family. About what we really are. You feel it sometimes, don't you? The urge to hunt, to track, to feed on the fear of others?" Marcus's blood ran cold. The impulse Robert described was something he'd never spoken aloud, never even fully acknowledged to himself. The satisfaction he felt when cornering a suspect, the way he could read guilt in a person's eyes, the almost supernatural ability to anticipate a criminal's next move, he'd always attributed it to good police work. "I don't know what you're talking about," Marcus lied. "Your father fought it his whole life. Rose fought it too, bless her soul." But Jerome? Jerome was different. He embraced what we are, and he started using it for the wrong purposes. Robert's voice dropped to a whisper. He was hurting people, Marcus. Innocent people. Children. The accusation hit Marcus like a physical blow. Uncle Jerome had been his hero, the fun-loving uncle who taught him to throw a baseball, who snuck him extra dessert at family gatherings. The idea that he could be capable of harming children was incomprehensible. "You're lying," Marcus said, but doubt crept into his voice. Robert reached into his coat pocket slowly, maintaining eye contact. He pulled out a manila envelope, its edges worn soft with age. "The evidence is all here. Police reports that were buried, witness statements that were ignored, victims who were too afraid to come forward. Jerome used his gifts to select his prey, to manipulate them, to make them compliant." Marcus accepted the envelope with shaking hands. The documents inside painted a horrifying picture: missing children, suspicious deaths, a pattern of predatory behavior that spanned years. And there, in black and white, were Jerome's fingerprints at crime scenes, his car spotted near abduction sites, testimonies from survivors describing a man who seemed to know their deepest fears. "The police were closing in," Robert continued. "Jerome panicked. He was going to run, but he planned to take his family with him. Patricia and the kids had no idea what he was, but they would have been accessories after the fact. Their lives would have been destroyed." "So you killed them instead?" Marcus's voice cracked. "I gave them a choice," Robert said quietly. "I told them the truth about Jerome, showed them the evidence. Patricia, she didn't believe it at first. But the children, they'd seen things. Little things that made sense once they understood what their father really was." Marcus sank into the couch, the weight of the revelations pressing down on him. What choice? Disappear completely. New identities, new lives, far away from Jerome and the horror he'd brought into their world. Or stay and watch everything they'd built crumble when the truth came out. "And Jerome?" Robert's smile was cold. "Jerome made his choice too. He chose to resist when I confronted him. He chose to threaten his own family rather than face justice. So I made sure he could never hurt anyone again." The room fell silent, except for the ticking of Rose's old grandfather clock. Marcus stared at the photographs scattered across the coffee table, images of a family that had been living a lie, of children who'd been in danger from the person who should have protected them most. "Patricia and the kids," Marcus said slowly. "They're alive? Living quiet lives under new names. Patricia remarried a good man, a gentle man. The children grew up safe, away from the darkness that runs in our bloodline." Robert leaned back in his chair. "I've been watching over them from a distance, making sure they stayed protected. And you've been watching me. All of you, the whole family. Making sure none of you follow Jerome's path." Robert's gaze intensified. "But you're different, Marcus. You use your gifts to catch monsters instead of becoming one. You're what Jerome could have been if he'd made better choices." Marcus thought of his career, of the cases he'd solved through instinct and intuition, of the predators he'd put behind bars. Had it all been because of some inherited trait, some family curse he'd never understood? "Why now?" Marcus asked. "Why tell me this now?" Robert's expression softened slightly. "Because I'm dying, nephew. Cancer. And because there's something you need to know about your current case." Marcus's blood froze. "What case?" "The Riverside Strangler. You're close to catching him, but you don't realize how close. Or how dangerous he is to people like us." Robert pulled out another photograph. This one recent. It showed a man in his 40s, unremarkable except for his eyes, which held the same cold calculation Marcus had seen in Jerome's old photos. "His name is David Kellerman. He's not just killing random victims, Marcus. He's hunting our kind. The photograph slipped from Marcus's numb fingers. The Riverside Strangler case had consumed his life for months, a serial killer who seemed to target people with an almost supernatural ability to read human nature: psychologists, detectives, social workers. People who could see beneath the surface of human behavior. "He knows what we are," Robert continued, "and he's systematically eliminating anyone who might pose a threat to him. You're next on his list, Marcus. The only reason you're still alive is because he's been studying you, learning your patterns." Marcus stood abruptly, his mind racing. "How do you know all this?" "Because I've been hunting him for the past 3 years. Ever since he killed your cousin David in Portland, Rose's grandson. The boy had your gift, Marcus. He was working as a therapist, helping people. Kellerman made it look like a random robbery gone wrong." The room spun around Marcus, another family member, dead because of what they were. The curse that had defined his lineage for generations had claimed another victim. "I need to call this in," Marcus said, reaching for his phone. "No," Robert's voice was sharp. "You call it in, and Kellerman disappears. He's done it before, in 3 other cities. New identity, new hunting ground. The only way to stop him is to use what you are, Marcus, to hunt him the way he's hunting you." Marcus stared at his uncle, seeing the weight of decades of secrets, of impossible choices, of a man who'd sacrificed his own family to protect them from a greater evil. "You want me to become like you." "I want you to become better than me," Robert said quietly. "I want you to use your gifts to stop a monster without becoming one yourself." The grandfather clock chimed 6 times, its sound echoing through the house like a countdown. Marcus looked at the photographs spread across the table. His vanished family, the serial killer who'd been stalking him, the evidence of horrors he'd never imagined. "Where is he?" Marcus asked. Robert smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. "He's been watching your apartment for the past week. I've been watching him watch you. He's planning to make his move tonight, when you get home from work." "Then we don't have much time." "No," Robert agreed. "We don't." The sun was setting as Marcus and Robert sat in Marcus's unmarked police car, parked 3 blocks from Marcus's apartment building. The plan was simple in concept, terrifying in execution. Marcus would go home as usual, drawing Kellerman out into the open. Robert would be waiting, ready to intervene if things went wrong. "Tell me about Patricia and the kids," Marcus said as they waited. "Are they happy?" Robert's expression softened. "Patricia teaches elementary school in Montana. Remarried 15 years ago to a man who loves her children as his own. The kids. Tommy became a veterinarian. Always loved animals, that boy. Lisa's a nurse, works in pediatric oncology. And little Marcus, yes, she named him after you. He's a high school counselor, helps troubled kids find their way. They don't know you're still alive. They know. Patricia sends me a Christmas card every year, pictures of the grandchildren I'll never meet. It's enough." Robert's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "They're safe, Marcus. That's what matters." Marcus studied his uncle's profile, seeing the cost of 26 years of solitude, of watching his family from the shadows. "It doesn't have to be this way anymore. When this is over, when Kellerman is caught, you could—" "I could what? Walk back into their lives and explain that I've been lying to them for decades? That I killed their husband and father, even if it was to protect them?" Robert shook his head. "Some choices can't be undone, nephew. Some sacrifices are permanent." They sat in silence, watching the streetlights flicker on. Marcus thought about the choices that had led him here. The decision to become a cop, to dedicate his life to catching predators, to ignore the strange instincts that had always guided him toward justice. Had it all been predetermined by his bloodline, or had he chosen to use his gifts for good? "There he is," Robert said quietly. Marcus followed his gaze to see a figure in dark clothing moving through the alley beside his apartment building. Even from a distance, there was something wrong about the way the man moved. Too fluid, too purposeful, like a predator stalking prey. "Remember," Robert said as Marcus reached for the door handle, "he's not just a killer. He's something else, something that knows how to use fear as a weapon. Don't let him get inside your head." Marcus nodded, checking his weapon one final time. "If I don't make it out—" "You will," Robert said firmly. You're stronger than Jerome ever was. You're stronger than me. You chose to be a protector instead of a predator. That choice matters, Marcus. It changes everything. The walk to his apartment building felt surreal. Every shadow potentially hiding danger. Every sound amplified by adrenaline. Marcus could feel eyes on him as he entered the lobby. The sensation of being hunted by something that understood the nature of the hunt far too well. His apartment was on the 4th floor. The elevator ride felt eternal. The hallway was empty, but Marcus's enhanced senses picked up traces of cologne and cigarette smoke that didn't belong. Kellerman was close, had been waiting for him. The door to his apartment stood slightly ajar, though he distinctly remembered locking it that morning. Marcus drew his weapon and called out, "Police! Building surrounded!" It wasn't true, but it might buy him time or force Kellerman to make a mistake. Laughter echoed from inside his apartment, rich and cultured and completely devoid of sanity. "Come in, Detective Holloway. I've been so looking forward to our conversation." The apartment was dark except for the glow of the television, casting flickering shadows across the walls. Kellerman sat in Marcus's favorite chair, completely at ease, as if he belonged there. He was smaller than Marcus had expected, unremarkable in every way except for his eyes, which seemed to reflect light like an animal's. "You're not surprised to see me, are you?" Kellerman asked conversationally. "I thought I'd trained you better than that." "Trained me?" "Oh, yes, Detective. I've been your teacher for months now. Every crime scene, every clue, every narrow escape from my previous work, all carefully orchestrated to help you understand what you really are." Kellerman's smile was predatory. "You feel it, don't you? The hunger, the need to hunt, the way you can taste fear in the air like wine." Marcus kept his weapon trained on Kellerman but didn't fire. Something was wrong. The man was too calm, too confident. "You're under arrest for the murders of your cousin David in Portland? Of Dr. Sarah Martinez in Phoenix? Of Detective Carl Brennan in Detroit?" Kellerman's laugh was like breaking glass. "I've killed so many of your kind, Detective. Each one thought they were the hunter. Each one learned too late that they were prey." "Why?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious despite the danger. "Because you're abominations," Kellerman said simply. "Humans who can smell guilt, who can track evil, who can make people confess their darkest secrets with a look. You're not natural. You're not supposed to exist." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And you're not supposed to be allowed to reproduce." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Sarah, his partner, his love, the woman he'd been planning to propose to, the woman who was 6 weeks pregnant with his child. "Oh yes," Kellerman said, reading Marcus's expression. "I know about Detective Sarah Chen. I know about the baby. Did you really think I'd leave loose ends?" Marcus's enhanced senses picked up the scent of fear and blood from the bedroom. He could hear Sarah's heartbeat, weak but steady. She was alive, but hurt. "Let her go," Marcus said, his voice deadly calm. "This is between you and me. Is it? Or is it between me and the monster you'll become if I let you live long enough to train that child?" Kellerman stood slowly, his movements fluid and controlled. "I've studied your family, Detective. I know about Jerome, about what he became. I know about your Uncle Robert, about the choices he made. The capacity for evil runs in your blood like a virus." "I'm not Jerome," Marcus said. "No, you're worse. You're Jerome with a badge, with authority, with the trust of the community. When you finally embrace what you are, when you finally stop pretending to be human, how many will you hurt before someone stops you?" Marcus felt the truth of Kellerman's words like a poison in his veins. The same instincts that made him a good detective, the same gifts that helped him catch killers, could easily be turned to darker purposes. How many suspects had he interrogated using methods that bordered on psychological torture? How many times had he used his abilities to manipulate people into confessing, regardless of their guilt or innocence? "I see it in your eyes," Kellerman said softly. "The doubt, the fear. You're starting to understand what you really are." A sound from the bedroom, Sarah's voice, weak but defiant, broke through Marcus's spiral of self-doubt. "Marcus, don't listen to him. You're not a monster. You're the man who brings me coffee every morning. You're the man who cries at dog rescue videos. You're the man who chose to spend his life protecting people." Sarah appeared in the bedroom doorway, blood trickling from a head wound, but very much alive. "You're the man I love," she said simply. Kellerman's composure cracked for the first time. "Touching," he snarled, "but irrelevant. You're both going to die tonight." He moved faster than should have been possible, crossing the room in a blur of motion. But Marcus was ready. His enhanced reflexes, the same gifts that Kellerman claimed made him a monster, allowed him to track the killer's movement and respond accordingly. The shot was clean, center mass, dropping Kellerman instantly. But even as he fell, the killer's hand found the detonator he'd been palming, and Marcus realized with horror that the apartment had been rigged with explosives. "Sarah, run!" Marcus shouted, but there was no time. The explosion tore through the building, flames and debris raining down like judgment. Marcus threw himself over Sarah, using his body to shield her from the worst of the blast. The last thing he saw before the world went dark was Uncle Robert's face in the window of the building across the street, a look of profound sorrow in his eyes. Marcus woke up in the hospital 3 days later. His body was a map of cuts and burns, but he was alive. Sarah was alive. Their unborn child was alive. Robert sat in the chair beside his bed, looking older than his years but somehow more at peace than Marcus had ever seen him. "Kellerman?" Marcus asked, his voice hoarse from smoke inhalation. "Dead," Robert confirmed. "Took half the building with him, but he's dead. The other tenants all survived, thanks to your warning. You evacuated the building before the explosion." Marcus had no memory of that, but he nodded anyway. "The case files? The evidence?" "All destroyed in the fire." "Conveniently." Robert's smile was slight but genuine. "The official report will say Kellerman was a disgruntled former patient of one of his victims, motivated by personal grievance rather than any supernatural vendetta. And the truth? The truth is that a good man used his gifts to stop a monster. The truth is that you chose to be a protector, even when it would have been easier to be a predator." Robert leaned forward. "The truth is that what we are doesn't define us. What we choose to do with what we are, that's what matters." Sarah appeared in the doorway, her own bandages visible beneath her clothes, but her smile radiant. "The doctor says you're going to make a full recovery," she said, settling into the chair on the other side of his bed. "Both of you." Marcus looked between the two most important people in his life, the uncle who'd sacrificed everything to protect his family, and the woman who'd chosen to love him despite the darkness that ran in his blood. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. Robert stood slowly, his movements careful but purposeful. "Now you live your life, nephew. You raise your child. You continue to be the man Sarah described, the one who brings coffee and cries at dog videos and chooses to protect people." He paused at the door. "And you remember that the capacity for good is just as hereditary as the capacity for evil. Maybe more so. Will I see you again?" Robert's smile was sad but genuine. "Probably not. But Patricia and the kids, they might appreciate a visit from their cousin, now that it's safe. I'll leave their address with Sarah." After Robert left, Marcus and Sarah sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset through the hospital window. The city spread out below them, full of people going about their lives, unaware of the monsters that walked among them, or the guardians who chose to hunt those monsters instead of becoming them. "Are you afraid?" Sarah asked quietly, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "About what our child might inherit?" Marcus considered the question, thinking about Jerome and Robert, about choices and consequences, about the thin line between protector and predator. "No," he said finally. "I'm hopeful. Hopeful that we'll raise a child who understands that having the ability to hunt doesn't mean you have to become a hunter. That having the capacity for darkness doesn't mean you have to embrace it." He took Sarah's hand in his. That love is stronger than bloodline. Sarah squeezed his hand. I love you, Marcus Holloway, all of you. Even the parts you're afraid of. I love you too, Marcus said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. Both of you. Outside the window, the city lights began to twinkle like stars, and somewhere in the distance, a family that had been thought lost forever was sitting down to dinner together, safe and loved, and finally, truly free. The Holloway curse had been broken not by violence or sacrifice, but by the simple, radical act of choosing love over fear, protection over predation, hope over despair. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.